You're standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert in Saudi Arabia. But in the middle of that emptiness, two enormous mirrored skyscrapers rise side by side, in perfect parallel to each other. This isn't just some sci-fi concept, it's the line, the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's boldest urban project yet. Now, Saudi Arabia is already home to some of the most ambitious architecture in the world, from Riyadh's King Abdullah Financial District to the iconic Abraj Al Bayt Towers in Mecca. They've been working hard for years. But the line is in a league of its own. This project was announced in 2021, and it is part of a larger vision for the country's future called NEOM, a $500 billion megaproject designed to redefine how people live, work, and interact with the environment. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, I don't know. But Nadmi Al-Nasser, the longtime chief executive of the ambitious project, has recently departed. Suspicious. Even more so because NEOM's statement issued soon after did not give any plausible reason for his departure. Then, the line project itself was originally expected to cost around $200 billion. But by 2024, that number had skyrocketed to a mind-blowing $2 trillion. That's about twice Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. And if you ask independent experts, they think it could end up costing even more. At first, the plan was to build about 10 miles of the project and have 1.5 million people living there by 2030. By now, the expectations are way more modest. Only just under 1.5 miles are likely to be done by 2030, with fewer than 300,000 residents. The project has come across a lot of problems along the way. Engineering issues and management problems have caused major delays, and progress hasn't been as fast as hoped. And now, let's figure out what exactly is the line. It's a literal city made up of two parallel skyscrapers, each towering 1,640 feet high. That's higher than almost all the tallest skyscrapers in the world. These skyscrapers are 656 feet wide and stretch for a mind-boggling 106 miles across the northwest of Saudi Arabia, right near the Red Sea. The most astounding thing? The entire city is actually within this one structure. There are no cars, no roads, no emissions. But we'll go into detail a bit later. The complex is supposed to house 9 million people, and all of this running entirely on clean energy. Such a project aligns perfectly with Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan. The outside of the skyscrapers will be covered in mirrors that will reflect the surrounding desert landscape, creating an almost seamless blend between the city and its surroundings. Inside, there will be lush parks, cascading waterfalls, flying taxis, and even robot helpers to take care of everyday tasks. They're also planning to make an artificial moon as part of the city's design. One more thing that makes the line so unique is its design. Unlike traditional cities that spread out horizontally, the line is vertical. Everything, homes, offices, parks, schools, shopping centers, are stacked on top of each other in layers. This means that residents won't need to travel long distances to get what they need. In fact, the designers promise that all amenities will be within a 5-minute walk from anywhere in the city. And while it's compact in width, the city's vertically layered structure means it can comfortably fit all 9 million residents, while leaving plenty of room for parks, natural spaces, and modern conveniences. There's even a plan for year-round climate control, keeping both indoor and outdoor spaces at comfortable temperatures, no matter how harsh the desert weather gets. Of course, even with everything close by, people will still need to get around the city. Worry not. The line has it covered in the most futuristic way possible. It features a high-speed train system that will travel from one end of the city to the other in just 20 minutes. That's 106 miles in 20 minutes with only 4 stops along the way. Imagine being able to get anywhere in the city faster than you could drive across town in most places today. Besides the train, the line will also have autonomous vehicles. Those will be cars and shuttles driving themselves with the help of advanced technology. They will handle everything from parking to going around obstacles. Even cooler, in the line, every car, train, and any other piece of infrastructure will be connected in a huge network called the Internet of Things. Sensors and real-time data will allow traffic to flow smoothly, preventing delays and reducing congestion. They first spoke about the NEOM project in 2017. Besides the line, NEOM is supposed to include an octagon-shaped floating industrial city and a posh mountain ski resort. There, Saudi Arabia will host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. Plus, there will be the world's largest green energy plant, which will make the region self-sufficient and sustainable. The goal of NEOM is to attract people from around the world, not just to visit, but to live there. Residents will even be given their own identity, Neomians. Not everyone thinks this construction is a good idea. Some urban planners and architects have pointed out pretty big flaws in the city's straight-line layout. You see, in a regular city like Johannesburg, which covers way more ground than the line, two random people are usually only about 20 miles apart. But in the line, the average distance between two random people would be 35 miles. That's almost double, even though the line's overall area is way smaller. This setup could make it harder for people to connect socially and might be a pain to navigate, even with a high-speed train zipping through it. Now, they promise that every resident will have everything they need within a 5-minute walk, but there are doubts too. People wonder if living in a super compact, stacked-up design might end up feeling claustrophobic or even too much to handle. As for the whole mirrored exterior idea, it looks pretty cool in renderings. But there's an opinion it could actually mess with the environment. Reflecting all that sunlight in a desert might disturb local wildlife or create unexpected heat issues. The line's high-tech features sound amazing, but they come with their own set of headaches. The city is supposed to run on the Internet of Things tech and autonomous vehicles. Sounds awesome, right? But how are they going to pull that off for a 106-mile-long city? For things to run smoothly, every piece of tech, cars, trains, infrastructure, needs to be perfectly in sync, sharing tons of real-time data. If there's even a tiny glitch, it could throw a wrench into daily life for millions of people. Then there's that high-speed train. It does sound like a dream, but actually building and keeping it running in the middle of a desert is not so easy. The heat, shifting sands, and wear and tear on the tracks could cause big delays and rack up costs pretty quickly. People around the world are questioning if the line is even doable. The first inhabitants were supposed to start living there by 2030, but there are reports about scaling the project back, so that deadline feels like a big stretch. There's also a sustainability issue. The line is supposed to have zero emissions and 100% clean energy. But building something so massive is bound to take tons of resources. With all these challenges, Saudi Arabia is looking into new ways to fund the line and figure out which parts of their Vision 2030 projects to prioritize. An insider has recently said that some projects might go ahead as planned, while others could be delayed or scaled down. This lines up with what Ali Shahabi, who's on NEOM's advisory board, has said. He admitted that the Vision 2030 goals were always meant to be super ambitious. Like, almost too ambitious. But he argued that even if they only pull off part of it in time, it'll still be a big deal.
How much do you know about Saudi Arabia? Here's a fun fact. Saudi Arabia is actually bigger than Mexico. And yet, 85% of the whole population lives in these two regions. This is like 20% of the total area. Hope you're hooked because it only gets more interesting. So, Saudi Arabia is located in the furthermost part of southwestern Asia, on this piece of land between Africa and Eurasia, which is called the Arabian Peninsula. You will find the country fast because it is the biggest one out there. In fact, Saudi Arabia is actually the 13th largest country in the world if we talk about the area. It's about the same size as Greenland. Wait, what? They don't look similar in size at all. Well, remember that the map is a projection of the globe. The scale of projections on different latitudes isn't the same. Closer to the equator, they are smaller. Closer to the north, the scale gets larger. So the flat map is quite distorted, so you shouldn't trust your eyes too much. Let's look at the globe and find these countries. Here is Greenland. And this is Saudi Arabia. Now they almost look the same. The Arabian Peninsula is a desert region, so most of that area is real desert. And since Saudi Arabia takes most of the peninsula, it has a lot of deserts too. 95% of the country's territory is a desert or semi-desert. Rub al Khali, the largest continuous sand desert in the world, is located in the country. By continuous, I mean there is nothing but eternal sands there, and it is truly huge. It's bigger than the Netherlands, Belgium, and France combined. And sand dunes can reach the height of a 60-story building. Yet, it's really hot and humid out there, and there are no natural water sources. There are, of course, seas around the country, but it's seawater. So, Saudi Arabia has to desalinate the water from the sea before it can be consumed. The country gets tons of water from abroad, but a gallon of water is still more costly there than a gallon of oil. So if you ever take a trip, stock up on the liquid of life. You will never guess what else the country imports from abroad. Sand! Yes, being a desert and having sand in abundance, Saudi Arabia still has to buy sand from Australia for construction and glass production. Turns out, desert sand is unstable and not suitable for that kind of business. At the same time, the country has something valuable: oil. At first, Saudi Arabia was a poor desert state. Then, in 1938, oil was discovered, and everything changed. Today, it has more oil than any other country and is the largest oil and fuel exporter in the world. Yet, you can imagine that harsh weather and climate conditions made people choose places for their settlements wisely. The reason why most of the population lives in a small area is because everything else is a big hot desert with no water. Here are the country's 7 biggest cities. Dammam is located right here on the shore of the Persian Gulf. This city has the largest airport in the world, the King Fahd Airport. It's 5 times bigger than the world's 2nd largest airport. Let's move to the west. Riyadh is the capital and also the most populated city. The word Riyadh means the garden. This probably reflects how the city was back in the day, an oasis in the middle of the desert. Now it's a huge megapolis with skyscrapers, and it has grown this big and tall in less than a century. Now let's move southwest and travel along the other densely populated area. The road from Riyadh to Aba is right west of Rub al Khali, the empty quarter. That largest continuous desert I told you about. That area isn't inhabited and isn't even fully explored. Yet beneath its sands, there are big reserves of petroleum. So maybe at some point, even the desert won't be a mystery anymore. Now we reach Aba. This name means perfume, and it's a true oasis in the desert. It's green. There are many flowers and landscapes that are breathtaking. It's the city of arts, cultures, and coffee. The city hosts an annual summer festival and is known for its unique cuisine and traditional folk arts. Dancing, painting, pottery, and wood carving. If Riyadh is all about business, Aba stands for culture. Now let's move north along the Red Sea shore. We'll see 3 cities, one next to another: Taif, Mecca, and Jeddah. Jeddah is the 2nd most populated city in the country, and soon it will make history. Right now, the Jeddah Tower is under construction there. This tower is planned to be 3,281 feet tall. This will make the tower the largest building in the world, surpassing the Burj Khalifa. The construction started in 2013 and then was put on hold for 5 years. In 2023, the construction was resumed. Jeddah also has the tallest fountain in the world, the King Fahd's Fountain. It shoots water as high as a 20-story building. Remember that the country has problems with fresh water? So of course they don't use that precious liquid. Instead, the fountain gets the water from the Red Sea, which means that the water in it is salt water. Mecca is the holiest city in the country. It's home to the world's largest mosque and many other sacred places. During religious holidays, the number of people in the city more than doubles. The road from Mecca to our next destination, Taif, is captivating by itself. It goes through mountain ranges and deep valleys, fruit markets, and rose farms. Taif is a mountainous city, usually covered in clouds. They give the city a much desired shade and some coolness. So you can imagine that it's a very popular tourist destination, especially in the summer, because it's one of the few places in the country with tolerable weather. Taif is unofficially called the summer capital of Saudi Arabia. It is also called the City of Roses. About 300 million roses are grown in the city every year. Once harvested, they're used to produce the world's most expensive rose oil. We have a few more big cities on the list, and we keep going north. The next stop is Medina. It's another sacred city with a rich history, and it's home to the largest mosque in the world. Not every visitor will get to see the city center because non-Muslims aren't allowed there. The outskirts are good too. Medina is the center of agriculture and is mostly known for its date palm trees. They have about 300 varieties of those. Let's grab a few and move northwest to the last city of our tour, Tabuk. It's an ancient city dating back thousands of years. That's why you can find ancient petroglyphs in various places. But it's not the only thing the city has to offer. Actually, Tabuk has it all. Ancient landmarks, gorgeous rocky landscapes, beautiful beaches by the Red Sea, many festivals with diverse cuisine and traditional Saudi Arabian music. Even better, the region is fertile and it's great for cultivating crops. In Tabuk, they grow citrus fruits, dates, and olives. Just a few words about the landmarks. There is UNESCO's World Heritage Site of the Nabatean ruins. And the Tabuk Castle is one of the oldest castles in the world. You can also check out the Hazma Desert. It's a museum of rare rock formations that appeared naturally over centuries. I don't know about you, but visiting Saudi Arabia is on my wish list now. What countries would you like to visit? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The tour is over, but I have a few more facts for you. The national animal of Saudi Arabia is the camel. Turns out camels are native to the Arabian Peninsula, and there's evidence that camels and people lived side by side for centuries. People in Saudi Arabia love and respect their camels. And on smaller roads, they're used as a form of transportation. There are even beauty contests for camels, and enthusiasts say that a beautiful camel stands out right away. And now, that's a wrap on Saudi Arabia. See ya!
Oh, Gravity, you heartless so-and-so. Well, that's what I think when I trip over a stone and fall face down. Of course, I'm not clumsy, you know. Anyway, gravity is a constant, right? Something entirely unshakable that we can always rely on in this ever-changing world. Unlike, love. Feeling romantic, sorry. But what if I told you that it's not as honest and clear as you think? There are places on our planet where gravity behaves like it's gone crazy. And that's why you clicked here. So let's take a look. Magnetic Hill in Leh, India. There's a stretch of road in India that's been attracting tourists from all over the world. It's no different looking from the surrounding landscape, and you could easily pass it by without noticing, if not for one very unusual and a bit creepy thing. If you stop your car on the magnetic hill going up the slope and put it on neutral, it'll start crawling upwards, eventually reaching the speed of up to 12 miles per hour. They say there's some sort of magnetic force at work here that tugs cars up the hill, hence the name. On top of that, even airplanes are said to gain altitude above this place. Skeptics offer another explanation, though. It's just the lay of the land that creates an illusion of going upwards, while in fact you're moving down the hill and vice versa. Whatever the truth, I'd like to see it for myself. Would you? Tell me down in the comments. The Crooked Forest, Poland. Near the village of Nowa Czarnowo, there's a forest in the depth of which you can find a strangely looking pine tree. Planted in the 1930s, there are 400 trees that sharply twist to the north almost at the roots, and then grow upwards in a semicircle. Although scientists offer different theories about the tree's weird growth, nobody can say for sure what made them look like that. Some say it's people who did it, while others believe it's a gravitational anomaly that somehow pushed the trees down. The trouble with this version, though, is that it would have had to stay there for years, and that only affected the trees. Still, no certain explanation exists anyways, so who knows? A waterfall, Faroe Islands. Ever seen an upward-moving waterfall? You can have a look at one on the Faroe Islands, halfway from Iceland to Scotland. But if you were expecting me to tell you an unbelievable story about a mysterious force pushing the water up the rock, then sorry, no such thing here. The truth, however, is quite jaw-dropping anyway. The winds in this place are so powerful that they lift the water and throw it back up. I guess it was this kind of wind that allowed Mary Poppins to travel on her umbrella. Sounds good. In fact, this waterfall is not unique. There are several more places on Earth where winds create an illusion of defied gravity. For example, there's the Kinder River in England that has a waterfall constantly struggling with the wind. It's so strong that half of the Cascades water seems to just fly up without ever touching the bottom of the drop. Hoover Dam in Nevada, USA. If you ever get up to the top of the dam, which is about 726 feet high, you can try a little trick. Take a bottle of water and pour it over the edge. You'll see the water flow up instead of spilling down. Once again, this isn't really any magic or unnatural phenomenon. The wind up here is simply too strong for the water to fall, just like with the waterfall on the Faroe Islands. Here though, it looks even more impressive since you can do it yourself. Dokkaebi Road, South Korea. Another gravitational anomaly located on a road. Locals once found out that if you put an empty can or a bottle on the ground, it will immediately start rolling uphill. Unlike other such places in the world though, Dokkaebi Road doesn't just create an illusion. When you walk down the slope, you don't feel as if you're going up. Everything's pretty normal. But once you put down an object that can roll, it will do that in the opposite direction than it should. Local authorities were quick to get the idea and put a signpost directing curious tourists to the mysterious road. Golden Rock, Burma. If you happen to be in Burma, these days it's also called Myanmar, make sure to visit this well-known site. A gold leaf-covered boulder sits upon the edge of a cliff, and a small pagoda is built on top of it. The impressive thing about the rock is that it only lightly touches the cliff for support. In fact, it looks like the boulder will fall any minute now, but it has been standing like that for centuries. On top of that, the pagoda built upon it is not really a recent addition, so it's quite an unusual sight to see. The rock seems to be saying, "Gravity? I don't care about that stuff." The legend has it that what keeps the boulder in place is a single strand of Buddha's hair. Well, I don't know about that, but you can check out the rock for yourself and see that it's not attached to the cliff by anything. And yet, it's not budged for 2,500 years. Something must be at work here, huh? Stone of Damasco, Argentina. If there ever was a thing that said, "I defy gravity" out loud, it's the stone of Tabasco. The huge 300-ton boulder stands precariously on the edge of a cliff and rocks a little bit from side to side in the wind. People even checked it by putting glass bottles under one of its edges. They exploded with another movement of the rock. Unfortunately, today you can't see this wonder of nature as it was a century ago. In 1912, the boulder suddenly dropped from its perch, which it had occupied for literally hundreds of years. The people in the nearby town of Tandil were so sad about this event that 95 years later, in 2007, they decided to restore the stone. Well, not exactly put it together chip by chip. They made a plastic replica of the rock and put it on the same spot and even in the same position. So even today, coming by Tandil, you can see its famous balancing boulder. More of a symbol now, of course, because it's no longer rocking and only weighs 9 tons, but instantly recognizable nonetheless. Devil's Tower in Wyoming, USA. Remember this place from the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? If not, you should go watch it, but not right now. This place doesn't make you feel like you're witnessing some magic and doesn't really trick gravity right before your eyes. Sounds almost boring compared with the rest of the sites on my list, right? But the true mind-blowing feature of Devil's Tower is that scientists can't explain how it came to existence in the first place. You see, it's an 867-foot rock formation with walls so steep they're basically vertical. But that isn't even the main thing. This piece of stone just rose amid rolling plains of Wyoming with nothing like it for miles and miles around. So how is it that such a flat landscape could have suddenly given birth to something so tall? Theories abound, but nobody has the answer yet. My theory? Well, perhaps here is where the Earth has a giant Audi belly button. Well then, you come up with a better theory. Oregon Vortex, USA. The House of Mystery in Gold Hill, Oregon amazes its visitors with gravity-defying effects. You can't stand straight there, always leaning to the side and having to hold on to something for balance. Balls roll upwards. And there's also a broom that stands perfectly still wherever you put it, unlike virtually everything else in this shack. The local Native American tribes called this place the Forbidden Ground, even before the house was built there, and they avoided approaching it. The owners of the shack, though, decided to turn it into an attraction, and they succeeded. They created an atmosphere of mystery around the place and spread the news about it in newspapers and later on the internet, and voila, a perfect anomaly is made. In fact, it's no more than a curiosity, a human-made optical illusion that tricks your eyes and other senses. Hudson Bay, Canada. Okay, we've talked about some pretty ambiguous stuff, but now it's time for the real deal, the Hudson Bay anomaly. This is probably the only place in the world where gravity is indeed lower than anywhere else on the planet. Even skeptics can't smirk at it because the difference has been measured with precision equipment. So, does it mean that the gravity here is as low as, say, on the moon then? Unfortunately, or is it luckily, I'm not sure yet, the difference is minuscule. The exact value is 0.005%, or 1/200%. You won't be able to feel it even if you try your hardest, but it's still there. Scientists say this anomaly exists because of the ice sheet that covered the area about 10,000 years ago. It compressed the rocks so much that they still can't fully recover, shifting the gravitational field in Hudson Bay. Sometime in the future, though, the gravity will return to normal in this area as well. No moonwalk for me then.
Imagine that everything built by humans now outweighs everything else living on the planet, including humans, animals, fungi, plants, and even microorganisms. And what if it won't be long until we have no room left, and we'll need to move to Mars and take what we can with us? The world leaders have turned to Frederick Salazar, the extraordinary problem solver with this predicament. They inform him that it's essential to measure the total weight, also called anthropogenic mass, if we want to take what we can from Earth to Mars. Although Frederick is the right man for the job to manage the situation, he knows he will need someone reliable. The person he has in mind is Annie Supernova. The daring explorer gifted with the superpower to lift the heaviest things is known for her deeds throughout Earth. Once, she quickly lifted the heaviest tower in the world, Burj Khalifa, and moved a pyramid of Khufu. Annie's supernova is driven with an adventurous spirit. No task is too large, no path too long. She is not one to be afraid to get her hands dirty, and those hands will get pretty messy when she calculates the total weight of the objects that humans have built. It will be a difficult task, but Annie has a game plan to examine materials used for buildings: concrete, bricks, and metals. She needs to consider which buildings to take to Mars and what will remain. Annie will need to venture deep into different areas around the world. Some locations are tough to access and may be dangerous. Well, the mission is on. New York. Annie is rushing through the busy metropolis. She quickly lifts the Empire State Building. Confused people wonder what Annie is up to as she quickly notes down the total weight of 365,000 tons. On her way, she also picks up a couple of skyscrapers, each of them being about 222,500 tons. She estimates the total weight of NYC is 3 billion tons in total. Well, she can move this city. She puts the buildings back and quickly runs to the airport. Annie flies towards Japan. Parachuting down, she stops at Tokyo Tower. Amongst the crowd of people, she quickly lifts it up to measure it, weighing 4,000 tons. As the onlookers are confused with Annie's actions, she quickly drives to a nearby fairground, which turns out to be abandoned. Annie arrives at a forest with high walls of vines. The vegetation makes it difficult to record the size. It's Nara Dreamland, closed for many years. Great roller coasters stand motionless, with vegetation growing in every part of the park, taking advantage of the still-standing structures of rides and old buildings. The foliage has made homes to birds and small animals. It doesn't appear as though any human has ventured this way for a very long time compared to when it was at its peak with 1.7 million visitors per year. It's now become a haven for nature. She takes a mass indicator to measure its total weight. She has an idea that all the materials can be reused or demolished to unload the Earth from the unused mass. She calls her robot friend the Leveler, who appears in no time, recycles all the materials, and saves the Earth from several thousands of tons. Annie takes notes and heads to Paris. Dodging the croissants and baguettes, Annie quickly weighs the Eiffel Tower. Built with solid wrought iron, it weighs a total of 10,000 tons. Annie wipes the sweat from her brow and moves on. Annie collects her things and takes a submarine to England. She arrives at the southern coast. From there, she discovers the Moncel sea forts, standing quietly alone with nothing but the surrounding sea. Lonesome, they sit in the water, the walls falling apart with seabirds' nests resting in the crooks and crannies of the buildings. It seems as though they were close to falling over. The legs beneath the waves stand firm. Seaweed and small crustaceans live peacefully, attracting small fishes that many birds above feed on. Although these structures were decommissioned in the 1950s, they were later used for pirate radio stations, providing free music. The seagulls now continue to deliver music instead with their amazing songs. Annie takes the notes with her mass indicator of this cast area. From here, Annie takes a refreshing swim in the Mediterranean Sea to Egypt to weigh the largest of the three pyramids, the Great Pyramid, the largest, weighing 5,750,000 tons, made from a mixture of limestone, basalt, granite, and mortar. Annie does some yoga to stretch her muscles after such a challenging exercise and takes her time to the following location. Annie gathers her warm weather clothing as she takes a trip to the Arctic in northern Russia. There, she finds an old weather station. Buildings make the only significant sights in this lonely area, surrounded by snow as far as the eye can see. Amongst the buildings, polar bears have moved into the houses as if they were built for them. The bears sit on the porch and look out into the distance through the windows. Annie laughs as they look as though they were impersonating humans living in their stead. Houses of 1,000 square feet or less fall into the small homes category. They have an average weight of around 50,000 to 100,000 pounds. Bears can stay there as they naturally took them over. Later, Annie heads to a warmer climate, finding herself in China along the Great Wall. She has to carefully pick up independent sections of this massive structure that covers a total of 5,500 miles. Altogether, the Great Wall weighs a whopping 58 million tons. Exhausted, Annie gathers her scuba diving gear to go for a relaxing swim towards Vanuatu. Here in Vanuatu, she dives underwater in a place called $1 Million Point, where people dumped many cars, trucks, and other vehicles in the late 1940s. Annie dives underwater and experiences the breathtaking beauty of the submerged mountain of metal machinery, laying silently in the depths of the water. Annie records the assortment of old vehicles, amazed because she notices that they have naturally created an artificial reef. Barnacles, corals, oysters, and algae have all attached themselves to the steel mechanisms, feeding off the minerals and growing into forests of underwater vegetation. Each vehicle creates an independent biosphere. She wants to call the leveler, but doesn't, as she sees hundreds of fish have made their home throughout the pile of discarded objects. The fish have found themselves shelter and the provided benefit of an unlimited buffet of vegetation. It's time to make her way back to headquarters and report to Frederick. She takes her time on her way back. As she flies over China, she sees 50 abandoned cities altogether. And on her way through the USA, she finds over 3,000 abandoned towns and, through some off-road locations, takes account of abandoned hotels, lighthouses, monuments, churches, castles, and all other types of structures in various shapes and sizes. Once again, noticing a different element throughout each one, that nature is abundant in the absence of humans. Annie finally arrives at the headquarters of Frederick's office, exhausted. Frederick greets Annie together with her friend Leveler, who just joined them. The boss awaits the final report. Annie shows her presentation. As per her assessment and calculations, the total weight of what humans have created on Earth is about 1,154 gigatons. It is in direct opposition to the dry weight of all life on Earth, called global biomass. In about 20 years, it is expected that the world will be covered in only anthropogenic mass. She presents what she had witnessed with the famous sites and abandoned structures. No doubt she can lift and move the necessary buildings to Mars, but there is no need to leave the Earth. They just need to unload the planet from the unused materials from the abandoned places. Whether on land or in the sea, nature has a second chance to return, which takes advantage of the materials and constructions to create their biospheres. Vines crawl the height of the walls. Trees grow in the soft sandy bricks. Insects feed upon the plants and flowers. Birds nestle within the vegetation. All kinds of animals have found a home in manufactured covers. These structures provide a new place to live. Frederick silently sits as Annie says that humans should also take an example from the other living things and give themselves a second chance on the Earth. The leveler smiles and is ready to work on the unused materials. And Frederick is ready to remind humans how unique and beautiful their planet is. Now the first rule is not to panic, the guy says. He gives Michael a thick suit. The weather is hot here, and the outfit seems very warm. You can't go without it, he adds. Michael puts on the outfit and feels goosebumps all over his body. Why is it so cold? The guide explains this is a unique cooling cloth. It'll save Michael from heat stroke inside the cave. The guide gives him an oxygen tank and a mask. Are we gonna dive? Michael asks. No, but your lungs may fill up with water if you don't use it. Michael's knees are shaking with fear. He doubts this whole idea. Welcome to one of the most dangerous caves on the planet, the guy says as he enters the dark space at the foot of a mountain. This place is called Crystal Cave, and it's located in Mexico. Magma had leaked here from the hot bowels of our planet 26 million years ago. It was coming and cooling down again and again. There was so much magma that it formed a mountain. Along with magma, mineral-rich water got here. It had been seeping through the rock tunnels and had formed a cave under the hill. Then, something strange appeared in these hot waters, something that seems to be from another planet. Michael is going down the road. He illuminates the bottomless darkness with a flashlight. The air becomes hot and heavy. Microscopic particles of water are hovering here. Along with a guide, Michael descends to 980 feet. This is more than half of the Empire State Building's height. The air temperature goes up. It feels as if they were approaching the Earth's core. Finally, the descent ends, and they jump on solid ground. The guy puts on an oxygen mask and tells Michael to do the same. You can't breathe in such moist and acidic air. The lungs can fill with water, which will lead to disastrous consequences. The air here feels to Michael as if he's walking through a very thick fog. The temperature rises up to 136 degrees Fahrenheit. It's higher than in the world's most hot deserts. Michael lights his way and notices something big, white, and shiny. It's a huge crystal beam sticking out of the ground that's reaching up. The whole cave is filled with these huge things. They stretch in different directions and rest against the ceiling and the walls. Somewhere they block the path, and somewhere they are like bridges. Michael climbs onto one of the crystals and walks on it. The guide explains that each column is made of gypsum. You know this substance as it's used to produce building material, plasterboard. Michael touches the hard surface of one of them. It seems that some ancient civilization could have built it. The guide says that everything inside this cave is natural. For the first time, this place was discovered by 2 miners in the year 2000. Since then, scientists have managed to find out that some crystals are 500,000 years old. You can also find one of the largest natural crystals in the world here. This beam is about 36 feet long and weighs 55 tons. This place is filled with water rich in calcium sulfate. This element is capable of forming minerals. A colorless variety of gypsum prevails here. The water and warm air help form the crystals. Humidity and temperature haven't changed for centuries, so these columns continue to grow even now. This place is fascinating. Michael wants to stay here longer to explore the cave, but unfortunately, it's dangerous. They may get lost or slip on the gypsum rocks. Plus, they're running out of oxygen, so they have to climb back up. They come out of the cave and meet the police. It turns out that it's prohibited for tourists to enter the cave. Even scientists must get special permission to go here. And it's for a good reason, since the cave is one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Michael and the guy pay a fine and leave Mexico. The next stop is Italy. It's a good thing you've taken a good camera with you, the guide says. This is one of the most fascinating caves in the world. You need the best equipment to capture this beauty. Michael and the guide are on a small boat. They sail along the coast of the island of Capri, Italy. Luckily, there won't be any danger this time. They are approaching a small rift inside the mountain. This is the entrance to the Blue Grotto. The hole is so tiny that only one boat can pass through it. Michael and the guide get into another dimension. The cave is filled with water. The walls are shining with blue light coming from the lake's depths. Michael takes pictures of the cave and notices that the entrance they got through glows with a bright white light. It's the sun's rays illuminating the cave as they enter it. There's another hole under the water. The sunlight penetrates through it, filling the lake with a blue glow. But it's time to move on. The next cave is in New Zealand. They arrive to the North Island. There's a place deep underground with winding, intricate caves. They appeared here about 30 billion years ago. Michael and the guide approach the entrance to the dark cave. Michael turns on a flashlight. "Take it away," the guy says. "You won't need it inside." They come in. Michael opens his mouth in surprise. The whole cave is filled with glowing lanterns. They are all living creatures, fireflies. They're shining with a blue light. Michael feels like he's on another planet. The entrance to the cave is limited to not harm the fireflies. Scientists use automated equipment to monitor the cave. They watch the temperature and the level of carbon dioxide necessary to maintain the life of glowing beetles. If many people get here, the level of carbon dioxide will increase. The time for a visit is also limited, so they ask Michael and the guide to leave the place. "Now, we're going to see something creepy," the guide says. "Are you ready?" And the next stop is California. The place is called Moaning Caverns. The cave seems quite ordinary from the outside, but the guide looks a little nervous and scared. They attach the rope to the belt and begin the long descent. The bottom is 165 feet deep. It's the height of a 15-story building. It seems not so big compared to the Crystal Cave. As Michael is going lower, it's getting cold and dark. At this point, all sounds from above disappear. They slowly sink into an ominous silence. "What is it?" Michael asks, startled. "I think I've heard someone's voice downstairs." The guide touches his lips with his finger to keep Michael silent. A long, prolonged human moan is coming from the dark cave depths. In the first seconds, Michael freezes. Then he quickly climbs up along the rope. The guide laughs at him. They hear another moan. Michael gets out of the cave and pulls the guide's rope to get him out. The guide says this is one of the creepiest caves in the world. The air and wind circulate deep inside and create a sound similar to a moan. Tourists often go down there to tickle their nerves. Also, they found about 100 skeletons of ancient people at the bottom of the cave. And no one knows how they got there. Michael doesn't want to go back inside the cave. He asks the guide to tell him how caves form. It turns out that it all starts when the ground absorbs acid rain consisting of water and carbon dioxide. The liquid penetrates through the soil and comes into contact with hard rock surfaces. When water touches limestone or dolomite, it dissolves them and helps to form an empty space. Every year there's more and more space around. The rain continues to fall and accumulate in this open area. Then the water forms a stream or an underground river. After that, the erosion of hard rocks begins. Thousands of years later, there's enough space to fit a human here. Then this space becomes a cave. When erosion combines with stalactites and stalagmites, it forms chambers and impressive columns. By the way, here's the difference between stalactites and stalagmites. Stalactites hang from the ceiling. Stalagmites stick out of the ground. It takes about 1 million years to develop such underground landscapes. So, every time you walk in these places, you come into contact with the ancient past of our planet. Hey look, some magical stuff is happening around you. Let's check out some real photos of overwhelming phenomena our Earth offers, and I'll chat about the science behind them. The rainbow-colored scarf cloud is a very rare natural phenomenon. World Meteorological Organization says that this kind of cloud is called pileus clouds. Here's how this rainbow scarf cloud takes shape. There are accessory clouds that depend on a larger cloud system in their development. An accessory cloud widens horizontally and gets shaped like a cap at the top. It attaches itself to the upper part of another cloud. These clouds don't last long, similar in time to a regular rainbow. The main cloud underneath eventually rises and absorbs the rainbow cloud. Now, who wants to see the ocean glowing and glittering like a sky full of stars? This phenomenon is called bioluminescence. When it happens, waves start sparkling neon blue thanks to a natural chemical process. Living organisms, such as tiny crustaceans and algae, use bioluminescence to trick predators, attract prey, or find potential mates. Sparkling nightlights have been photographed across Australia and the Indian Ocean. This form of ice is called hair ice. It looks like cotton candy, but it melts away with the sun, not rain. Hair ice is a very unusual phenomenon, and it only forms under specific conditions. It grows on the surface of particular kinds of wood at temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit if the weather is calm and humid. The hairs can grow up to 8 inches long. In 2015, scientists discovered the fungus responsible for this smooth, silky ice hair. The presence of this fungus leads to a process called ice segregation. The fungus prevents ice crystals from gathering into more stable shapes. Ice can still form on these branches when there's no fungus, but it would be shaped just like normal, not hair-like ice. So, what does this fungus do to make this magic happen? The liquid near the surface of branches is in contact with chilly air. This creates a thin layer of ice. It blends a thin layer of water between the ice and the wood pores. This results in a suction force that pushes the water out of the pores toward the ice at the surface. It freezes there and adds to the existing ice layer. The process repeats over and over. Here you go! Thin hairs of ice are pushed out of the wood. Lake Baikal in Siberia is famous for its crystalline waters. It's the largest freshwater lake on the planet by volume. It contains 20% of Earth's fresh water. It's also very wide. To put it in perspective, it's larger than Belgium. Plus, it's the oldest lake in the world, about 25 million years old. When it freezes during the winter, large shards of transparent ice form on its surface. They appear turquoise because the lake has clear waters. These gem-colored ice structures on the lake's surface are called hummocks. Hummocks are ice splitters. When fierce winds around the lake push its water into waves, they freeze into these turquoise blocks. Hummocks can be 32 to 39 feet high. Now, take a look at Naga fireballs. This natural wonder occurs in a specific area around the Mekong River in China. They appear throughout the year, but they're more common during the full moon in late autumn. How they appear is a mystery. These fireballs seem to rise from the water. They can go as high as 985 feet. They're like fireworks, disappearing just as rapidly. They typically have a reddish or orange glow. Did you know that earthquakes emit light too? It turns out that earthquake lights have been around for centuries. They appear before, during, or immediately after an earthquake. They're generally white or blue. The lights rarely last for more than a few seconds, so it's hard to capture them on camera. Yet, on rare occasions, they can shine for up to 10 minutes. Sometimes they're at the epicenter, while at other times they're seen up to 250 miles away. They've been spotted over the ocean, too. Scientists know for sure that how powerful an earthquake is somehow influences this phenomenon. The lights have only been reported during earthquakes rating 5.0 or more on the Richter scale. Scientists have some theories, but it's still a bit of a mystery why the lights exist in the first place. Moonbows have similar principles to rainbows. They occur when the light gets reflected off water droplets in the sky. Yet they're much rarer than rainbows. They can appear only under certain conditions. When the moon is very low over the horizon, the sky is dark, and water droplets are in the part of the sky opposite the moon. Halos, also known as circle rainbows, are an optical phenomenon forming high in the sky when the light gets reflected off ice crystals. They look like large circles of white or colored light circling the sun or the moon. The next one is not as rare as the others just mentioned. A sinkhole forms in the ground as a result of some form of collapse of the surface layer. Most sinkholes are caused by the chemical dissolution of carbonate rocks. They're usually circular and vary in shape and size, both in diameter and depth, and you don't want to drive into one of those. A fire whirl is a whirlwind induced by fire. Most of the time it's composed of flames or ash. This phenomenon is also sometimes called a fire tornado or fire twister. It's pretty clear how it got this nickname. It looks like a tornado, and yes, it's made of fire. Yet these terms usually refer to a separate thing, where a fire has such intensity that it creates an actual tornado. Fire whirls are different. They usually don't count as tornadoes, as the vortex doesn't extend all the way from the ground to the cloud base. Lenticular clouds are usually in parallel alignment to the wind direction. They have a particular shape. Look at it. That's what people imagine when they think about a spaceship of visitors from outer space. Many people dream of witnessing this one, the aurora borealis, or the famous northern lights. It's a free natural light show in the sky. Charged particles from the sun strike atoms in Earth's atmosphere. Then, they cause electrons in these atoms to change to a higher energy state. Eventually, the electrons get back to a lower energy state. That's when they release photons of light. Obviously, Nordic countries are the best places to see this show. But hey, you can see the northern lights in Scotland too. The morning glory cloud is a very long rolled cotton-like cloud. It's seen occasionally in various parts of the world, but there's one place on our planet where they occur on a regular basis. It's the Gulf of Carpentaria in northern Australia. These clouds can stretch for 620 miles. Plus, there can be more than one morning glory cloud at a time. So far, we've seen moonbows, halos, and many other phenomena. But how about looking at a fire rainbow? Now, the fire rainbow is much easier to say, but the actual name of this thing is a circumhorizontal arc. Say it with me. Circumhorizontal arc. Very good. It's another cool optical phenomenon that occurs in cirrostratus clouds. Check this out. The next two cool facts are related to animals. What would you do if 1 million butterflies flew over your head? This might happen if you see monarch butterflies while they're migrating to Mexico or Southern California. These butterflies cannot cope with cold winters, nor can I. So every fall, they migrate either to the south or west, where it's warm all year long. Now, this is a field completely covered with spider webs. This phenomenon only occurs when spiders flee from floods or other kinds of natural disaster. When they leave, they find a higher place to spin their webs. Usually, such a place is a tree or an agricultural field. Since many of them gather in the same safe region, they all make their webs at the same time. Doesn't this huge spider web look like a thick blanket? Yeah, you go lie down in that. Just kidding. Have you ever come across unique natural phenomena? Comment below and let me know.
Google launched its Google Maps service more than 15 years ago. Since then, curious users from all over the globe have been making exciting finds. For example, this band of holes in Peru. The band is about 1 mile long. It consists of more than 6,000 bizarre holes. All of them have different diameters and depths. This phenomenon has nothing in common with the more renowned Nazca lines. The purpose of this place, as well as its creators, has remained a mystery since 1933. That's when an aviator published an aerial photo of the holes. At the moment, archaeologists can only make assumptions. The most plausible theory is that the holes were storage pits constructed at the times of the Inca Empire. Well, I don't know whether it's true or not, but this band of holes gives me the creeps. And how about this artificial island in the Netherlands? It's located in Kettlemeer Lake. The island looks exactly like a geological pin icon, but if you visit the place, you'll see that it's actually a depository that's no bigger than half a mile across. It's used to store polluted silt. And here's another island, nicknamed Galešņak, which means Lover's Island. This place lies in the Adriatic Sea between Italy and Croatia. The place is nothing more than an uninhabited piece of land, with no fresh water or any constructions, but the island's owners are trying to use the internet fame their property has gained over the years. These two long barren patches actually look like two scars going across the heart. But the reason for their appearance is way less romantic. Those are the marks left by bulldozers. The island owners want to plant olive trees to turn the place into a perfect wedding location. You can enjoy all the beauty of Dublin's Shamrock Maze only from the air. The place is located to the south of Dublin Airport and the side of the freeway. When you're flying to Ireland next time, keep an eye out for it. Because you won't be able to get to this place by land in any case. Google Street View shows that the road leading to the maze ends with a big metal gate. The sign on this gate warns you that it's private property guarded by dogs. If I were you, I wouldn't risk it. if you still want to find the way out of a maze, you should go to the UK. This giant fingerprint is called the Finger Maze. You can find it in the Hove Park in the city of Brighton and Hove. The maze is a public sculpture lined with stone and lime mortar. The environmental artist Chris Drury created the Finger Maze in 2006. The sculpture symbolizes the journey of life. Look at this luxury cruise ship. I wouldn't mind boarding it to go on a trip around the world. The only problem? It's not real. It's a ship-shaped shopping mall lost in a forest of giant Twitter hashtags in Hong Kong. The mall was built in the middle of Whampoa Gardens. That's a huge apartment complex built on the site of former dockyards. The complex is 360 feet long and several stories high. Besides the cruise ship mall, you'll find there movie theaters, restaurants, stores, and even a mini indoor theme park. Well, if not a luxurious sea cruise, then at least I can do some shopping. You can probably learn geography with the help of the world map at Lake Claytroop. Soren Poulsen, a local farmer, created it by hand between 1944 and 1967. The man used stones and grass. First, he dragged lots of rocks to the edge of the lake. Then, during the winter months, he used a sled to bring the stones to their place. And finally, in the spring, when the ice melted, the man easily tilted the stones into place. Soren must have been very dedicated to his idea, because some of the stones weighed more than 2 tons. The world map includes tiny lakes and rivers. It even has a mini boats for people to sail the Pacific Ocean in the summer. There's also an 18-hole mini golf course, a playground, and a picnic area. Now we're moving to China, to a much more mysterious place. Colossal symbols there look as if they were printed on the surface of the Gobi Desert. There have been loads of theories about their origin, but the symbols turn out to be a human creation. Jonathan Hill is a research technician and mission planner at the Mars Space Flight Facility at Arizona State University. He thinks these grids are most likely satellite calibration targets. When you look at a bullford kiwi in the Google Maps version, the bird looks a bit too stretched and kinda skinny, but the national icon of the New Zealand is still perfectly recognizable. In 2007, the kiwi was cleaned and now it looks as white as new. The bullford kiwi was carved in 1919 in the chalk of the Beacon Hill in England. This tradition of carving figures into the chalks of Wiltshire goes back to the Neolithic age that started in 10,000 BCE. These potash evaporation ponds in the USA are out of this world. The electric blue ponds create a shocking contrast with the reddish-brown soil in the Utah desert. They're a place for extracting potassium chloride. It's also known as potash. In Google Maps photos, you can see the most famous and most photographed potash mine. It's located in Moab, Utah. One of the coolest things you can see on Google Maps is the Atacama Giant in Chile. This geoglyph is more than 1,000 years old and almost 300 feet long. Geoglyphs are large designs in the ground. They're usually made of rocks, stones, and gravel or carved in the soil. When this bizarre face was found in Antarctica, it provoked tons of heated discussions and insane theories. But scientists claim there's a more logical explanation. It can be the result of pareidolia. This bizarre effect causes your brain to see structures and patterns where they don't exist. This is the reason why people notice recognizable shapes in clouds, rock formations, and other objects. Up close, the face isn't likely to look like a giant half hidden in the snow. All you'll see will be just ice covered with cracks. But whatever it is, I bet anyone who suddenly sees this face on Google Maps is bound to start getting strange ideas. Lonar Lake in India appeared when an asteroid collided with our planet about 50,000 years ago. The rim of the meteor crater is about 6,000 feet across. The lake itself is a bit smaller, with a diameter of around 4,000 feet. So far, there is nothing unusual about this place. But only until you found out that in June 2020 something happened to Loner Lake. The water changed its color from green to bright pink for a couple of days. Experts believe this change might have been caused by increased salinity in the water. It could also be the presence of algae or the combination of both factors. In any case, I wouldn't dare to swim in the water of Loner Lake. Has Google Earth just shown you a colossal target symbol in the middle of the Nevada desert? It isn't a joke, Photoshop, or an art object. Most likely, this huge thing is a marking used as an aerial photo calibration target. And finally, my favorite one, an underwater car in the Bahamas. It's remained on the bottom of the fresh creek for quite some time. No one knows the history behind this unusual find. I'd give a lot to know how this poor car turned up there.
Back in December 2012, a lot of people were freaking out over the idea that the world might end in some catastrophic event. And it was all thanks to the famous Maya calendar. This ancient way of tracking time had been the subject of endless speculation. But one of its biggest mysteries was definitely an 819-day count found in some versions of the calendar. No one could explain why it was there or how it worked, until recently, when a group of researchers from Cambridge might have finally cracked the code. First things first, how does the Maya calendar work? So the system the Maya civilization used to track days was based on something we now call the calendar round. Think of it like 3 interlocking gears. These are 3 cycles working together. The first is a 365-day solar year, known as Hab. The second is a cycle of 20 names. And the third is a cycle of 13 numbers, which forms a 260-day sacred calendar, called Solkeen. Just like we'd say something like December 25th, 2025, they named their days based on how these 3 cycles lined up. For example, here we have the day 3 Manik and the 14th of the month Hop. It takes 52 years for the 3 cycles to align in the same way again. After that, the days start repeating. But this is where things start to get more complicated and mysterious. On some Mayan monuments, we have also found enigmatic inscriptions pointing to the existence of another cycle, the 819-day count. There are about 20 examples of these inscriptions, mostly found in places like Palenque and Yaxchilan in Mexico. So it didn't seem random at all, and this calendar must have been hiding a big secret. Early research showed that the 819-day cycle was represented by one of 4 colors and the cardinal directions associated with them. Black was tied to the west, red to the east, white to the north, and yellow to the south. Researchers also discovered that this period of time could be broken down into 3 smaller cycles. One of 9 days, one of 7 days, and one of 13 days. Multiply them together, and you'd get 819 days. Pretty cool, but why did they do that? This color scheme and the 3 cycles seemed like a basic level of interpretation, and experts were pretty sure its real purpose was still hidden from us. Another thing researchers noticed is that this strange count of days was mostly shown using a Y glyph, followed by a number. But in some cases, they also added a glyph representing Kawil. This was a powerful Maya deity, often associated with creation and lightning. He was usually symbolized by a torch coming out of his forehead, representing the spark of life. But in the 90s, a study suggested that when Kawil's inscription showed smoke and fire coming from his forehead, it could actually represent the planets Jupiter or Saturn, or maybe even both. Wait, that means that the 819 days count could be linked to both planets in some way. From there, research focused on figuring out what that link might be. The first conclusion is that this calendar might have helped the Maya track the movements of those planets in some way. Then they started noticing something interesting. These cycles could be specifically tied to the synodic periods of Jupiter and Saturn. By synodic periods, we mean the time it takes for a celestial body, like a planet, to return to the same or nearly the same position as seen from Earth. While this possibility was pretty exciting, something didn't quite add up. Each planet moves very differently, and trying to fit multiple planets into an 819-day span just didn't seem to work. In other words, this 4-part color-coded calendar system was simply too short to align perfectly with the synodic periods of the visible planets. So it looks like we're back to square one. This mystery had people scratching their heads for ages, until 2023, when specialists realized they might have been looking at it all wrong. Researchers actually needed to shift their perspective. Instead of seeing this system as 819 days, they needed to consider the number as representing timelines. And this period of time could be just a small part of a much, much bigger calendar. You see, as we said earlier, this cycle seemed to track the period when a planet became visible to people on Earth. To prove that these 819 cycles were timelines, not actual days, researchers needed a planet that could serve as a starting point to back up their theory. In this case, it was Mercury. And there's a pretty simple reason for that. Mercury's synodic period is 117 days, which fits perfectly into the calendar count. I mean, if you take 1819 and divide by 117, you get the number 7. So, Mercury is the only visible planet whose synodic cycle fits neatly into this period as whole numbers. Perfect. Now they had a solid starting point. From there, they needed to expand the calendar by increasing its length to 20 periods of 819 days. Suddenly, a pattern emerges. And just like that, all the synodic cycles of the planets fit perfectly into the system. For example, Saturn's synodic period from 378 days lines up perfectly after 6 819-day cycles. Venus aligns every 5 cycles, Jupiter every 19 cycles, and Mars, which takes the longest, needs 20 cycles. In other words, it takes about 45 years for Mars to align with the synodic periods of all visible planets. So, this is how researchers determined that the ancient civilization wasn't referring to days, but rather to timelines. The Maya astronomers came up with this count as part of a larger calendar system of 20 periods. But then a question comes up. Why was studying the synodic periods so important to the Maya? Well, we don't have super specific answers about this mysterious calendar yet. But what we can say for sure is that the Maya truly believed in the powerful influence of the cosmos on daily life. So maybe they wanted to analyze how the movements of all the visible planets lined up with their other calendars. Of course, this system is just one part of the Maya's amazing and advanced understanding of astrology. And it wasn't just about using astrological cycles for planting and harvesting. They also had crazy specific knowledge, like how to predict solar eclipses. Archaeologists believe the Maya connection to the stars is reflected in the ruins of their world. Take the famous pyramid in the ancient city of Chichen Itza, located in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. If you look closely at the base of its staircase, you will see a snake's head carved in stone. But here's the coolest part. During the spring and fall equinoxes, when day and night are exactly the same length, the sun casts sharp, triangular shadows on the staircase. It creates the illusion of a snake slithering down the steps. Another example of how they use their knowledge of astronomy in their temples is in Tikal, Guatemala. Built around year 1 of the Common Era, this pyramid is considered one of the Maya's earliest astronomical complexes. And its alignment and orientation allowed them to track and calculate solstices and equinoxes with incredible precision. The Maya were skilled skywatchers. Just like we have modern-day high-tech observatories with round domes, they had something similar. Meet El Caracol. The name means snail in Spanish and refers to the spiral staircase inside the tower. Built around 906 Common Era, it was the perfect place to observe all the changes in the sky and track the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. Unlike us today, with our telescopes, satellites, and advanced tools, the Maya relied entirely on naked eye observation, and that makes their achievements even more incredible. There's something really bizarre going on at these 12 points scattered across the Earth. The vile vortices, as they're called, are these creepy spots over the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and the North and South Poles, where weird forces seem to take over. You've probably heard of the most famous one, the Bermuda Triangle. It's believed that more than 50 ships and 20 airplanes have mysteriously disappeared in this area, which is located between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. But what most people don't realize is that the Bermuda Triangle actually has 11 siblings, and these other spots can be even more terrifying. Let's start with Mohenjo-Daro. This was a thriving city located in what is now Pakistan. Built around 2500 before the Common Era, this urban center was once home to about 40,000 people. But then, suddenly, people abandoned it by the year 1700 before the Common Era. In the 1940s, an archaeologist discovered 39 human skeletons at the site, which fueled the theory that the city was invaded by some other civilization at some point. But honestly, it's hard to confirm that, since archaeology doesn't really explain the city's sudden destruction or the disappearance of its people. It's led to a bunch of bizarre theories. One of them talks about an ancient extraterrestrial race that might have lived there, and a malevolent wind that swept through the city. Another ancient city with a similar mystery is the Great Zimbabwe. Its construction began in the 11th century, and at its peak it housed up to 18,000 people. But for reasons we'll probably never fully understand, it was abandoned in the 15th century. Archaeologists were really interested in this place, and that's when things got even weirder. They found 8 of these birds, now called the Zimbabwe birds. These soapstone sculptures were found sitting on stone columns that were over 90 centimeters tall. Nothing like them has ever been found anywhere else, and their meaning is still a total mystery. Some think each bird represents a new king, but other theories suggest they were ancient animals very dear to the people who lived there. Adding to the mystery, local legends talk about a strange, short man who's sometimes seen wandering around, but he always disappears before anyone can get close. Then there's Easter Island, another one of the 12 vile vortices. It's located in the eastern Pacific Ocean, and it's famous for its nearly 1,000 enormous statues called moai. We still don't know what they mean, or how they were made. Some of them are almost 30 feet tall and weigh as much as 80 tons. Today, it wouldn't be that tough to move and carve these statues, but we're talking about a period between the years 1100 and 1680. So nobody really knows how they did it. Some specialists believe these statues were carried across the island, while others think they were pushed on log rollers. But the most bizarre theories suggest extraterrestrials were involved. Algeria is another land rich in ancient mysteries, and one of the most fascinating is something called the Jeddars. These are 13 monuments with square stone bases and angular mounds, built between the 4th and 7th centuries. But the weird part is, no one knows their purpose. One of them had an inscription in Latin, but it was so worn down that the message was nearly impossible to read. The best guess so far is that these monuments were probably tombs for royalty, although no one knows exactly who was supposed to be buried there. What we do know is that there are many myths related to strange disappearances in the region. The next mysterious spot is located south of Tokyo in the Pacific Ocean. and it's called the Dragon's Triangle. Does that name ring a bell? Yep. Just like the Bermuda Triangle, this area is known for strange disappearances of airplanes and ships. One of the most chilling stories dates back to 1945, when a plane allegedly vanished. The pilot supposedly sent a radio transmission right before the aircraft disappeared, claiming that something strange was happening in the sky, like it was opening up or something. While this story is definitely eerie, the truth behind it and many other Dragon's Triangle legends is still up for debate. If you type Hamakulia volcano into Google Earth, you'll find it located in Hawaii's Ring of Fire. But this place is so shrouded in mystery that it's hard to find much information about it. Some legends speak of unusual electrical energy being detected in the area, and there's even a story about an eyewitness who claimed to see a plane flying over it totally disappear from the radar. Another eerie spot is the South Atlantic anomaly, which is an area on Earth where natural radiation flows out of control. While this doesn't affect our daily lives on the surface, it has a pretty big impact on Earth's atmosphere. The radiation there is so intense that it can knock out the onboard computers of spacecraft and interfere with the data collected by satellites passing through the area. To deal with this, specialists had to add an additional shield to the International Space Station. The South Atlantic anomaly is also linked to a weird event that astronauts experience called cosmic ray visual phenomena. They've reported seeing random flashes of light or shooting stars out there in space, but it's all just some kind of illusion. From wild radiation to strange seismic activity. The Wharton Basin in the Indian Ocean is a place known for unusual tectonic events. In April of 2012, a massive earthquake measuring magnitude 8.6 hit the region. This was considered the largest intraplate earthquake ever recorded, meaning it happened within a tectonic plate rather than at its boundary. This caught the attention of scientists, who now speculate that the region might be forming a new boundary between the Australian and Indian plates. But for now, this is all still one big mystery. Now let's head to the Pacific Ocean. More specifically, to the New Hebrides Trench. This submarine trench is about 750 miles long and 45 miles wide. It formed when the Australian plate slid under the New Hebrides plate. There's no doubt that this is one of the creepiest and deepest spots in the ocean. The danger isn't just down in the deep sea either, as this trench has been connected to several earthquakes that affected New Caledonia and Vanuatu. This area also has some strange features. For example, when scientists explored it, they didn't find a single grenadier fish down there. This type of fish is one of the most common deep-sea creatures you'd expect to see in trenches around the Pacific. So why aren't they around the New Hebrides Trench? Maybe they know something we don't. The two remaining vile vortices are the North and South Poles. These two are on the opposite ends of the planet, but they share one thing in common: strange disappearances. One of the most famous stories from the North Pole happened in 1897. 3 brave explorers set out on a journey to reach the North Pole using a hot air balloon. But they never completed their mission. Their mysterious disappearance remains one of the most intriguing, unsolved mysteries in the history of Arctic exploration. The South Pole is also known for similar mysteries. It's believed that hundreds of people may be buried beneath the snow and ice of the coldest continent on Earth. Even with all the advancements in technology and knowledge, the South Pole can still be extremely dangerous for anyone who ventures there. The temperatures can drop to almost minus 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and the winds can get up to 200 miles per hour. And that's definitely enough reason to stay away. Now that you're familiar with the 12 vile vortices, let me tell you something even stranger. If you look at a map, you'll see that these places are arranged in a way that looks pretty similar across the globe. Here's the weird part. If you connect these spots where unexplained events have occurred, you actually form the geometric shape of an icosahedron. This could be just a huge coincidence, But the fact that these mystery spots align with this shape makes them even more intriguing.
On December 5, 1952, a nauseating yellow-gray fog engulfed London, claiming 12,000 lives. This wasn't mere mist, it stank of rotting eggs and stretched 30 miles wide. Buses halted, planes were grounded, and ambulances were trapped. For 5 days, the city vanished in the stench and sludge, streets slick with a black ooze. Those who dared ventured out stumbled blindly, smudging their faces while birds crashed into buildings. With visibility zero, thieves ran rampant, and even indoor shows were canceled. The Great Smoke sent over 100,000 people to hospitals, leaving a grim legacy of demise and decay. The causes of this tragedy started long into the past. Something called pea soup fog became one of the symbols of London in the 19th century. Nature wasn't to blame for this fog. It was caused by people burning coal to heat their homes and run factories. In fact, London's air started getting smoky all the way back in the 13th century, when people began widely using coal. It got worse as the city grew bigger. By the 17th century, people were already complaining about the dirty air. King James I tried to prevent so much coal burning with new laws, but nothing really changed. As more factories popped up during the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, the problem blew out of proportion. The air was full of tiny particles that water clung to and formed dark, heavy clouds. This mix of smoke and fog became so bad, people called it smog. Yep, this word was invented in London in the early 20th century. The smog got so thick sometimes it could last for a whole week, and it made people ill. Some even passed away because of it. Even though the smog was harmful, people didn't want to stop using coal because it gave them jobs and kept their homes warm. So the problem lingered. By the 20th century, thick fogs were happening less frequently, finally, because factories started moving away from the city. But on that December day in 1952, an anticyclone appeared over London. This meant that the cold air near the ground got trapped under warmer air higher up, like a lid keeping everything underneath. Because of this, all the smoke from factories, cars, and home fireplaces couldn't float up and away like usual. Instead, it clung near the ground, mixed with water in the air, and produced an extremely thick, dirty fog. Plus, daylight in December is shorter, and it was really cold, so people had to use even more coal for heating and lighting than they normally did. All this led to a disaster. It was clear that sulfur particles from the burning coal made the fog yellow and smell like rotten eggs. But scientists couldn't figure out why and how these particles turned into sulfuric acid. Decades later, an international team of researchers recreated that scary fog in a lab. They used samples of air and atmospheric measurements from the fog in 2 large Chinese cities that have high levels of sulfur dioxide in the air, just like London during the Great Smoke. They learned that the thick, dirty air, called haze, doesn't form in the same way in London and in China. In London's fog, smoke from burning coal released 2 gases, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. These gases mixed with water droplets in the fog, which made it harmless at first because the water diluted the harmful chemicals. But as the water evaporated and there was nothing to dilute the 2 dioxides, the fog became very acidic and hazardous to breathe, so it damaged people's lungs. In present-day China, things are a little different. A third chemical, ammonia, joins the mix. Now ammonia, which comes from farms and cars, helps balance out the acidity of the fog, so it's less harmful than London's deadly fog. But the scientists found that cutting down on nitrogen dioxide and ammonia could still help China reduce its air quality problems. They hope that their discovery will help both understand London's past fogs and give China ideas for making its air cleaner. It could also save the health of millions of people around the world who are now living in cities with bad air quality. After the terrible fog of 1952, everyone realized how serious London's air problem was. 4 years later, the British authorities created a law called the Clean Air Act to stop something like that from happening again. This law banned people from burning smoky fuels like coal in their homes or in factory furnaces in some parts of the city. To help people adjust, the authorities gave them money so that they could switch to cleaner heating options like oil, natural gas, or electricity. It took time for these changes to make a big difference, and sadly, another dangerous smog happened in 1962. But the Clean Air Act was a very important first step for protecting the environment and people's health. Almost a century before the Great Smoke, another smelly event happened to London, the Great Stink. Back then, people didn't have proper bathrooms or sewers, and all the waste from houses and factories went straight into the River Thames. When the weather got super hot in July and August, the water level in the river went down, and piles of waste, sometimes 6 feet, popped up on the muddy banks. The smell was so terrible that even Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had to cancel their relaxing boat ride on the river. The politicians working in the brand new Parliament buildings, which were right by the river, couldn't handle the smell either. The air inside was so terrible that they had to hold handkerchiefs over their noses to breathe. They even tried soaking the curtains in chloride of lime, hoping it would cover up the horrible odor. Many Londoners believe that the bad air, called miasma, caused horrible things like cholera, which had already taken the lives of lots of people. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette solved the problem as he built a new sewer system that would move all the waste away from the city. His sewer system was so well designed that it still works today, even though London has grown to over 8 million people. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the United States, there was also a day when you couldn't see your hand before your face, and it was impossible to breathe outside. But the reasons for this Black Sunday were very different from the Great Smoke of London. In 1931, it almost completely stopped raining in the southern Great Plains. This drought lasted for nearly 10 years. Without rain, the farms dried up and the soil turned to dust. Strong winds blew this dry dirt into the air and created huge dust storms. These storms, called black blizzards, made it hard to breathe and see anything. People tried to protect themselves by putting Vaseline in their noses, wearing masks, and sealing their homes, but the dust still made many of them sick. In 1934, things got even worse. It was the driest year in over 1,000 years. Temperatures went over 100 degrees for weeks, and the land became even drier. On April 14, 1935, after months of terrible weather, the sky finally looked clear, and there was barely any wind, which was rare for this area. People came outside as they were hoping that the worst was finally over. When Oklahoma minister announced that a few good rainstorms would make the land fertile again. But unfortunately, that morning, a cold wind from Canada met warm air in the Dakotas and started a massive dust storm. The storm grew to hundreds of miles wide and thousands of feet tall. A sunny day instantly became completely dark. Drivers had to hide in their cars, and other people went down into basements, found refuge in barns, fire stations, tornado shelters, and under their beds to stay safe. The storm didn't stop for hours and took at least 20 lives. Many people couldn't stop coughing, and one man went blind. The storm was so strong, it carried 300,000 tons of dirt across the country and even reached the East Coast.